9:39 with some breaking news just into the newsroom. Equifax announcing an additional 2.4 million people are impacted by last.
Equifax has now reached a global settlement following that massive data breach.
Largest class action lawsuit in history involving Equifax has settled. It involves the data breach that leaked.
March 2017. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Equifax, a giant in the financial world, was like a fortress of data that seemed impossible to break into. Headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, it was one of the big three credit reporting agencies, the backbone of the American economy. Along with Experian and TransUnion, Equifax held the keys to the financial lives of almost every adult in the country. Their company image was all about being stable, secure, and super reliable. They made themselves look like they couldn't be attacked, which was super important for a company whose whole business was built on trust. But this was just a trick. This trust wasn't totally by choice. For millions of Americans, dealing with Equifax was something they couldn't avoid. Every time someone applied for a mortgage, a car loan, a credit card, or even a job, their information went into these agencies' huge digital vaults. Consumers didn't choose to give their data. It was collected, put together, and sold as a normal part of modern life. They were silent partners in a system that promised to keep their most private information safe in exchange for access to credit. The simple promise was, "We will keep you safe." Inside the shiny glass and steel of their headquarters, the daily grind of corporate life went on without a hitch. Thousands of employees processed an endless river of data, creating credit reports and scores that decided the financial future of millions. They managed complicated systems, answered client calls, and worked to keep the company's good name as a careful keeper of personal information. The atmosphere was professional, organized, and seemed safe. The information they handled wasn't just numbers on a screen, it was the complete blueprint of a modern identity. Full names, social security numbers, dates of birth, past and current addresses, driver's license numbers, and detailed credit history. This was a treasure trove of personal information, the digital DNA that could be used to open bank accounts, get loans, and effectively steal someone's entire life. In the wrong hands, this data wasn't just valuable, it was a weapon. But far from the boardrooms and cubicles, in the unseen world of cyberspace, a huge flaw had appeared. It was a tiny crack in the company's big digital armor, a weakness in a widely used web application called Apache Struts. To the outside world, nothing had changed, but for those who knew where to look, it was an open door. This flaw wasn't just a small bug, it was a huge weakness, a ticking time bomb waiting for a spark. And in the shadowy world of cybercrime, someone is always looking for a spark. This single, unpatched weakness would soon allow bad guys to get past all of Equifax's defenses. They wouldn't just steal a password or a credit card number. They would gain control, allowing them to move around the company's internal network however they wanted and take out data on a scale never seen before. They were about to break into the digital equivalent of Fort Knox for personal data and walk out with the keys to the kingdom for almost 150 million people. The disaster that was coming wasn't about a few messed up accounts. It was a total failure, a data breach so huge it would affect almost half of the adult population of the United States. The consequences would be personal, immediate, and long-lasting, leaving millions of people at risk of identity theft for years. What happened in the next few months became a classic example of corporate carelessness and a scary reminder of how vulnerable we all are in the digital age. It caused public anger, investigations by Congress, and a painful reckoning for a company that had failed in its most basic duty. Through expert analysis, insider stories, and the experiences of those directly affected, this film will break down the Equifax data breach. We will look into the technical mistakes and human errors that allowed the attackers to succeed. We will hear from cybersecurity experts who saw the warning signs and from victims who are still dealing with the aftermath. Our story looks at the key moments, the discovery of the weakness, the company's slow and messy response, and the long, difficult aftermath for both Equifax and the public. We will explore the consequences for regulations and ask an important question. Have we really learned anything from one of the most damaging data breaches in history? We start with that one line of code that brought a corporate giant to its knees. Chapter 2: The Vulnerability. The story of this breach doesn't start with a bang, but with a line of code. This flaw was in Apache Struts, a popular open source framework used to build web applications. Think of it as the digital plumbing for countless websites trusted by corporations and financial institutions worldwide, including Equifax. In March 2017, the Apache Software Foundation found and announced a critical vulnerability officially called CVE 2017-5638. This was a security hole that allowed someone to run code from far away. Simply put, it was like leaving a master key under the doormat, letting an attacker run any command on the server from anywhere. A fix was sent out right away. The digital world was put on alert. Equifax was told. The Department of Homeland Security sent out an alert urging companies to apply the fix. Equifax's own security team ran scans to find vulnerable systems, but here the process stopped. Their scanning software didn't identify the specific web application that was exposed. For 2 critical months, the master key remained under the mat. On May 13, 2017, attackers found that open door. They gained access to an online portal on Equifax's network. But they didn't stop there. Once inside, they started moving sideways, exploring the company's huge connected digital systems. They carefully checked the system for 76 days, almost completely without being noticed. They found unsecured files with usernames and passwords stored in plain text, a huge mistake in cybersecurity. These login details unlocked dozens of other databases, which were full of sensitive information. Through this ever-growing loophole, they started taking out the most important personal data, social security numbers, dates of birth, home addresses, and in some cases driver's licenses and credit card numbers. Everything a criminal would need to create a new identity. The systems kept running. The logs recorded activity. The attackers ran almost 9,000 different searches against the databases, carefully packing the stolen data into small files to avoid being noticed. The digital theft was happening slowly, right under the security team's nose. It wasn't until July 29th that an internal security tool, whose certificate was finally renewed after a 10-month lapse, started checking traffic and noticed something was wrong. By the time the alarm was finally sounded, the attackers had already taken out a lot of data. The damage done was shocking. The personal information of 147 million Americans, 15 million British citizens, and thousands of Canadians was now in the hands of unknown people. This was one of the most important data breaches in history, putting the financial identity of almost half of the US population at risk. Next, how the breach came to light and the chaos that followed. Hackers broke into Equifax between May and July 2017 and quietly took out data, lines of code, automated scripts, slowly pulling out records, names, social security numbers, dates of birth and addresses, and in some cases credit card numbers. Server logs showed repeated access patterns, the fingerprints of the data being taken, data streams flowed out, blurred to protect privacy, but the volume was huge. In total, 147 million people were affected, almost half the country. Newsrooms started picking up the story as its scale became clear. This was a digital robbery with a human cost, identity theft, fraud, and long-term uncertainty. The public would find out about it one day, and that changed everything. On September 7, 2017, Equifax publicly announced the breach. The news spread like wildfire. There was a lot of fear everywhere. Social feeds and headlines were full of advice, anger, and confusion. Millions of people started checking their credit reports. Banks and card companies took immediate action. Government officials demanded answers. Investigations began. Equifax's stock fell. Reports surfaced that executives had sold shares before the disclosure, which further fueled public anger. Class action suits were also filed.
Largest class action lawsuit in history involving Equifax has settled. It involves the data breach that leaked the name.
Pushed for accountability. Consumers placed fraud alerts, froze accounts, and kept a close eye on their personal finances. Equifax faced a lot of backlash. Trust built over decades was shattered overnight. Next, attribution and motive. After all of this, the FBI started a huge investigation to untangle this complicated story of digital invasion. After 2 years of very hard forensic work, the US Department of Justice released an indictment. The culprits weren't hackers in a basement, they were 4 members of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. Investigators officially linked this attack to Chinese state-sponsored actors, turning a corporate data breach into an act of international spying. The goal wasn't to make money quickly. This breach fit into a well-known pattern of state-sponsored cyber spying. The aim was to get a huge database of sensitive personal information. This data could be used to find and track American government officials, intelligence agents, and military personnel. It was a smart move to build a treasure trove of information for future counterintelligence operations, recruitment, or even blackmail. The personal data of millions of ordinary citizens became a strategic asset in a global chess game. As the scale of the breach became public, Equifax's response was widely seen as a case study in what not to do. The company created a special website for consumers to check if they were affected, but it was full of glitches and security worries. They offered free credit monitoring, but it was through their own company, a move that got a lot of criticism. The public outrage was very strong, leading to many government investigations and the resignation of CEO Richard Smith, who faced tough questions from a very angry Congress. For the 147 million people affected, the damage was permanent. Unlike a stolen credit card, you can't just cancel your social security number or date of birth. The fear of lasting identity theft became a constant low-level worry. A settlement fund of over $700 million was set up to pay victims, but for many, a small cash payment or a few years of credit monitoring felt very insufficient for a lifetime of looking over their digital shoulder. Inside Equifax and across the corporate world, this breach kicked off a frantic overhaul. In IT rooms, teams rushed to fix vulnerable systems, strengthen firewalls, and completely update their security monitoring. But the real lesson went far beyond technology. This event showed a failure in how companies were run, where cybersecurity was seen as an expense, not a basic business risk. Companies were forced to adopt stronger practices, making multi-factor authentication, end-to-end encryption, and strict, regular updates the new normal. The role of the Chief Information Security Officer moved from the server room to the boardroom. This breach became a huge wake-up call, leading to a strong public debate about whether credit reporting agencies should even exist. For decades, these private companies had collected huge amounts of information on almost every adult American, often without their direct permission. Now their weakness was exposed. This event forced a national reckoning. Who should own our most personal data, and what responsibility do the companies that profit from it have to protect it? Cybersecurity was no longer an optional IT expense, it was a critical matter of public trust and company survival. In the end, the Equifax breach was much more than just a big cybersecurity failure. It was a breaking of the social contract in the digital age. It affected almost half of the US population, exposing the basic information of their lives, names, social security numbers, birth dates, and financial histories to a foreign enemy. It showed the deep weakness of a system we all rely on but few truly understand. But as defenses get better, attackers adapt. No system is truly safe, and the question is not if the next big breach will happen, but when. The story of Equifax is a clear, lasting reminder that in a highly connected world, a single weakness, a single missed fix can have effects that stretch for decades, changing not just company rules but also how we protect our digital future